Good evening and welcome to our second virtual Sweet Thursday event. Just give me 1 second. Well, we are having some technical issues. Okay. Okay, let's try that again. Tonight, we are on Zoom webinar, and unlike Zoom meeting, we cannot hear or see any of you. The chat and raise hand functions are disabled, but Q&A will be open for you to type in your questions for our author. This talk is being recorded, and we will have that recording available on a YouTube link in future library communications. It has a capacity of 500, so sign up early for any program that interests you. This hasn't yet been an issue for Sweet Thursday, but last month's WOW program on Frida Kahlo did sell out. I am having issues with my computer. Sorry about that, folks. Sweet Thursday is the author series hosted by the Friends of the Lafayette Library. My name is Jeff Deeden, and I'm the coordinator of the Sweet Thursday program. This afternoon, Friends board member Ruth Thornberg will introduce and interview award-winning journalist and author Joan Ryan about her book, Intangibles, Unlocking the Science and Soul of Team Chemistry. Friends programs will be virtual for at least the remainder of the year. We have 2 additional Sweet Thursday programs and 1 WOW, as you can see on the 14th, 15th, and 19th. If you'd like to learn more about the programming on the library, you can sign up to subscribe to our weekly ad lib emails, which come Saturdays, by going on to llcf.org/subscribe. Or if you want to learn about all the programming for the library, events of which occur on multiple different branches of the library, that website is ccclib.org. The Friends of the Lafayette Library support a number of library functions in normal times. This would be pre-COVID times, and these include the Sunday hour library, librarian hours, books and other materials for the library programs, Friends programs, and support for the Library Foundation and the Historical Society. After months of being closed by the pandemic, the Friends Corner Bookstore is again open and available for curbside pickup. The Amazon store is also open and can be accessed from the Friends website. Note that we are not yet able to accept book donations. For their support, especially in helping me try to manage this world of Zoom, I would like to thank the Friends, the library staff, the Library Foundation, our committee, including Ruthie and Robin, as well as Arinda Books, from which you can buy signed copies of Joan's book. And now I will introduce our moderator tonight, who is Ruth Thornberg, known to many of you. She has volunteered for years on the board of the Friends of the Lafayette Library, including a term as president. Among her other duties, she's a member of the Sweet Thursday Committee. I know you'll enjoy her conversation with Joan. So Ruthie, it's time for you to turn on your video and audio, and you can introduce Joan.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here again. I've missed our Sweet Thursday get-togethers at the library, but I'm excited to be here tonight with our author, Joan Ryan. The book that we're going to be talking about, as Jeff said, is Intangibles, Unlocking the Science and Soul of Team Chemistry. This book was just published this year, 2020, and we'll have a lot of time to delve into it. It's been a very informative book for me as I've read through it. But she's also, this is only one of 5 books that she's written. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Joan and her background. She had a book, Melina, the Story of the Father Who Raised an Unlikely Baseball Dynasty, was published by Simon & Schuster. And this was a New York Times bestseller and also a finalist for the ESPN Penn Sports Literary Award. Joan is a pioneer in sports journalism. She became one of the first female sports columnists in the country. She covered every major sporting event from the Super Bowl, the World Series, to the Olympics and championship fights. Her sports columns and features have earned 13 Associated Press Sports Editors Award, the National Headliner Award, and the Women's Sports Foundation Journalism Award. Among other honors, she's been awarded the Fabulous Feminist Award by the San Francisco Chapter of the National Organization for Women. And she was also named a woman who could be president by the San Francisco League of Women Voters. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit too in our discussion. Her newspaper work has spanned 25 years, the last 22 which have been in San Francisco. She has also been featured in quite a number of other publications throughout time. Her very first book was Little Girls in Pink and Pretty Boxes, The Making and Breaking of Elite Gymnasts and Figure Skaters. This was a very controversial, groundbreaking book, expose, if you will, that Sports Illustrated named one of the top 100 sports books of all time. It was one of the top 50 sports books for the Guardian newspaper in London, and the Sporting News chose it as one of the top 3 sports books of 1995. This book and Joan were featured on Oprah, 60 Minutes, Nightline, The Today Show, People Magazine, The New Yorker, The New York Times, Time Magazine, and other media around the country. Joan also wrote The Water Giver, the story of a mother, a son, and their second chance, And she co-wrote with Stanford and Olympic coach Tara Vanderveer, Shooting from the Outside, How a Coach and Her Olympic Team Changed Women's Basketball. Her work has also appeared in the Chronicle magazine, many national magazines, The Best American Sports Writing, A Kind of Grace. Let's see, there's so many great things about her background. It's really been fun learning about Joan. She's also a founding member of Coaching Corps, a nonprofit organization that taps into the power of sports to help low-income youth learn and grow. She's a frequent commentator and speaker on, among other topics, children's and family issues, girls and women's sports, juvenile justice, and education. She's taught writing at San Francisco State and UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. Joan was born in the Bronx, then moved to Florida, and eventually made her way to San Francisco. She came in 1985 and became a full-time sports columnist for the San Francisco Examiner. She was hired by the Chronicle in 1994. Anyway, I'd like to welcome Joan Ryan to Sweet Thursday. Joan, if you'll turn yourself on, well, there you are.
There. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. So glad to be here with you tonight.
Yes, it's really been a pleasure reading your book, and I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight. So I think I'd like to say the first thing about the book that I found so fascinating is the message really is not just about sports. It's about teens throughout. Whether you're at work or you're in a family, there's a lot of issues here that are relevant beyond sports. Can you tell us what inspired you to write this book? Was it a curiosity about relationships, or just a phenomenon you've been observing for years? Maybe you could give us a little background.
Sure. First, I do want to say thank you and welcome everyone. You know, it's so strange to be talking and not knowing exactly who I'm talking to. Like, I'm talking with you, but talking to other people. And you know, welcome and thanks for joining us. I actually been really looking forward to this because I know it's a crowd that loves books. Like, you're not on here unless you really love books, and certainly I do. So to get to your question, Ruth, you know, one of the things I loved about covering sports, because I never aspired to be a sports writer. You know, I was editor of my high school paper. Like, I loved journalism. And one of the reasons I loved journalism was I was a super introverted kid growing up. And it lasted, you know, well into adulthood. I've pretty much gotten over it, you know, kind of had to. But I loved being able to kind of be the first person who was exposed to the news, right? When you're in a newsroom or you know, at your school paper or whatever it is, like, you know, before anybody else knows what's going on. And that's really fun. But I didn't have to be in front of people. My name didn't even have to be in the newspaper because I was editing. You know, I was just too introverted to even put my name on something. So I got a degree in journalism at University of Florida with a focus on editing. Ended up at my first job at the Orlando Sentinel. And as I'm sitting there on the news desk, I mentioned to a colleague, you know, well, maybe, you know, I better learn how to write, or I better have some writing experience if I'm going to be editor of this paper someday. You know, I was very ambitious. And so I thought, growing up, you know, one of 6 kids from the Bronx. I mean, I lived in the Bronx when I was just a very little child, but my father was both parents, Bronx guys. So, you know, I read the sports section, and I always thought, in general, the best writing in a newspaper is in the sports section. And oftentimes the worst writing in the newspapers in the sports section. So I end up writing sports. I get into sports, not wanting to stay in it, thinking I'm going to go back into news. But what I discovered in writing sports, and this is circling widely back to your question, is that I wasn't that interested in the statistics or, you know, any of that sort of thing. I just wanted to write about the people. And I thought, and I was covering mostly professional sports. And so you think, like, what is different about this person that they were able to make it this far? And it's a different story for everyone. And I also loved when I ended up in San Francisco in 1985, and, the first time I'm in a baseball clubhouse and realizing that they call it a clubhouse for a reason. Like, those guys just live in there and they're hanging out and they live out their lives. And so you're in this, very odd and totally compelling culture. And I just loved sort of watching these guys interact with each other. And without really knowing this was what I was doing, I was taking all that in about relationships. And so I loved that 1989 team, and those of us in the Bay Area remember, it's the Will Clark, Mike Krukow, Robbie Thompson, Kevin Mitchell team and the Earthquake World Series. And in 2009, they had their 20th reunion, and I went to that reunion after having spent so much time with them in 1989. And as I walked through the big party tent on the outside of the Giants ballpark, now the downtown ballpark, right? They were a Candlestick back in the day. I could just hear it in their voices and see in their faces that they still loved each other. There was this bond and affection that they had for each other that totally captivated me all over again. And as I drove home, and this was post Moneyball, when everything was sabermetrics, everything was about statistics. And I was a huge fan of Michael Lewis, and absolutely saw how important the statistics were and the analytics were. But he dismissed, and many people on that side of the fence totally dismissed team chemistry as just this myth, this rationalization we use when a underdog team succeeds, right? And when I'm driving home from that 2009 reunion, I'm thinking, I really respect Michael Lewis, but there seems like there's something here. And so I set out, without thinking I was writing a book or whatever, I just got gripped by this topic. Does team chemistry exist? If it exists, what is it? And then how does it affect performance? Because why even talk about it if it doesn't affect performance? And then 11 years later, my book came out. A scant 11 years.
Well, it shows the amount of research and thought that you put into this book. Honestly, as I read it, I really felt a sense of your commitment to the topic. And I felt you were very thorough, which I enjoyed a lot. And in your research and your background with, between interviewing key people and so forth, I just felt like you brought forth in the story a lot of really good comments that, again, they resonate, whether you're a sports star or you're just, a person trying to live your own life and deal with the things that come forward. So one of the comments that I really enjoyed, and I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about, you make a lot of references to love and connection. And just in your opening discussion, you talk about how these guys still love each other. They still feel that connection. And I think that, anyone who experiences that in life is sort of privileged, and I think you understand the value of it. You have a quote from A General Theory of Love, which was written by Thomas Lewis. And I just love this. No human is a functioning whole on his own. Each has open loops that only somebody else can complete. And the other quote from this person as well, there really isn't a you the way you think there is. I thought both those concepts were really fascinating, and I'd love for you to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, that blew my mind. Somebody recommended that book to me, A General Theory of Love. And I thought, well, what does this have to do with team chemistry? And as I read it, I thought, this is like the Rosetta Stone of team chemistry, because it is all about how we affect each other, right? And so I'm sitting in, it turned out, I had no idea he was even local. It turned out, I live in Sausalito. It turned out his office was right next to the No Name Bar on Bridgeway in Sausalito. So you go into this nondescript door between the No Name Bar and I think a chocolate shop or a t-shirt, probably a t-shirt shop. And you walk up these stairs and you go into his office, and we just sat there talking, and I asked him about that quote, that line in his book, that no human is complete on his own. And he brought up to me all these examples, right? One of which, and most of us who got through high school science probably heard this about this study of I think they were the macaque monkeys that they found. Well, first of all, it was the orphans in last turn of the century Europe, where disease would spread so easily through these orphanages among these babies. So they shut down, they told the caretakers, don't touch these babies, except to feed them and change them. So, they followed that, and they put up these, plastic liners between each thing. These babies were totally isolated and not being touched or cooed over. And they found that up to 75% at all these so-called sterile orphanages, the babies died. And then 50 years later, scientists went and looked back and realized, we need babies, and we never get over it. We need touch. We need connection. We need to look in someone's eyes, hear their voice, look, the signals that they're sending us on their faces. And, it made me think of, and isolation, as we know, is a killer. And with this pandemic, that was one of the things I was almost more worried about than the virus itself, is that, all these people who live by themselves and, total isolation in their, apartments or homes, and have no connection, physical or otherwise. And, when you think about Castaway, anybody who saw that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, and he instinctively knew he couldn't survive by himself without someone to talk to and relate to. And he turned the volleyball into Wilson, who was his companion the entire time he was on that desert, that deserted island. And not only, we think, that's bizarre. No, we didn't think it was bizarre. We all accepted it like, oh yeah, okay, that's Wilson. He needed Wilson. So we instinctively know that too. And as I'm having a conversation with him, he said, and trying to describe how profoundly we influence one another, he said, well, how, you just feel like you're funnier with certain people, or you're just sharper when you're with certain people, or you're just sillier, maybe, whatever it is. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, there's these one friend that I'm not a naturally funny person, and I'm funny with this friend named Erin. I'm really funny with Erin. And I said, so she's tapping into something in me, that I have anytime I want. I just don't, she just brings it out in me. He said, well, sort of. He said, you're talking about that as if there is a you. He said, there is no you. There's only you in relationship. So who I am with Erin is very different than who I am with you, Ruth, or with my husband, with anyone else. And I thought, wow, I had to wrap my brain around that. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, it's so true. And I invite anybody who's listening tonight to start to, report on yourself. Look at how you're mimicking, how you're mirroring other people's, facial expressions, their tone of voice, their hand gestures, because we're picking up on all those signals, the most subtle signals. Our brains evolved to pick up on everything. And even what we're so unconscious of all of that information coming at us, but we're totally recalibrating our own responses from everything that we're gathering from the people we're in connection with.
Yeah, fascinating. I really love that concept. And honestly, since I read it in your book, I have been thinking about it. I agree. There are certainly people that just bring out an aspect of you that you don't get with everyone. And then there's some people you just kind of, I don't know, you're just a little more in the background. You just don't feel quite the connection. So it is very informative. I thought that was a fascinating idea to think about. Well, along those lines, there's also, there's lots of ways to interconnect and interact with people. And one of the things you talk about is the joking culture is a trusting culture. You can't have a teasing relationship with people you don't really care about. And this was from Gary Allen Fine. So I love that line too. I grew up with only brothers, and trust me, I know a lot about teasing, either giving it or getting it. I think it's not always easy to be the only girl in a crowd. Yeah. But sometimes to survive, you have to do that. So it made me think about how fun really is teasing in its right place. And I would imagine you might have some, I don't know, insight into some of the fun pranks that would happen in the clubhouse, or I don't know if you feel like revealing some of that, but it might be fun to share with our audience.
Well, it is true, and that's one of the things I love about teams. Yeah, especially teams that have been together for a while and really connect with each other, because they do needle each other in the funniest ways. And that's my son who walked in and didn't turn off his phone. So sorry, I am at the dining room table, and so that may not be the last time that happened. That they totally needle each other in a way that some ways in the real world, like if you were just in an office place and you didn't know each other that well, you didn't have that almost, brotherly, sisterly connection with each other, if you didn't have total trust where you can assume good intention, you cannot tease like that. And so I just love, in the and I hear it more now because now I'm on the inside. I'm the senior media consultant for the Giants. It's my 13th season with them. So I left from being a journalist, which you're held at arm's length, right? You can't be in the clubhouse, except at certain times. And being the media consultant, I'm in the clubhouse all the time, talking to the players. And now he's rattling around with the pots and pans. Anyway.
Welcome to COVID. It's okay.
I know. But anyway, so I could be in there when they're throwing these things back at each other. And it is a very male humor because everything is a put down. And it is there's like clubhouse funny, like there's regular funny and then there's clubhouse funny. So there was a lot I didn't find very funny, like the day that this wasn't needling, but it goes to show what passes for not just humor, but also sort of team building in a totally bizarre way. And that was in 2010 when the Giants won their first World Series. And there was this, and this goes to culture and how a culture of trust and acceptance, because you can't have acceptance without a level of trust, right? So this real, I don't know. I mean, I think, and I'm being totally honest here, I think this guy's a total creep, and he's just not he is not a good person. He was a bad teammate on every team he had been on, and the Giants were sort of desperate for, somebody could hit in the middle of the lineup. And his name is Aubrey Huff. And everybody who has followed the Giants will know exactly who I'm talking about. Now, he comes onto the Giants into a fairly young team with, Lincecum and Buster Posey and young guys. And they didn't know anything about his reputation. And the Giants only got him because they couldn't find anybody else. They signed him to a 1-year contract off the scrap heap. And he walks in, and because he's a veteran and he's fairly charismatic, you know, and he's clubhouse funny, right? So they were attracted to him. And long story short, this guy becomes this the linchpin in a way of that clubhouse. I hesitate to use the word leader, but the rest of the players told me, you know, several years later, as I was looking into, well, what made that team work? Because it kind of shouldn't have worked because there was no clear leader. Buster Posey was too young. And they said, oh no, it was Aubrey Huff and then his friend Pat Burrell, who came in later. It was that, and I was like, no, it wasn't them. You know, and I finally went to Buster Posey and I said, Buster, everybody's saying that Aubrey Huff was the leader of that 2010 clubhouse, you know, and he said, oh yeah, he was. And I made a face and he said, well, why are you making that face? I said, oh God, because he's just not a good human being. And Buster just looked at me, he was very offended. He said, no, he was the leader of that clubhouse. And so it really taught me, and this is why there's a whole chapter about it, that if you have a strong enough and a healthy enough and a trusting enough culture, that culture can transform every member in it. So it's often like the person will transform the culture, and that happens a lot. And then the opposite, you know, is also true, that the culture really shapes the people in there. And my goodness, I have never seen anyone changed or have the kind of totally unexpected impact that Aubrey Huff had. And again, to circle back to the teasing and the humor, one of the things, he would do things like this. And he did have pretty good timing, I must say, in that, you know, when the team was starting to get a little tight, you know, as the season's going on and, you know, they're getting better, they're getting into the playoffs, and nobody predicted them at the beginning of the 2010 season. He was first of all, he was one of the holdouts who would walk through the clubhouse naked, even when there were reporters in there, which nobody does anymore. When I started, all the players did that. But this, like, nobody does that anymore. And he still did it, you know, of course. So he's walking through the clubhouse one day, totally, you know, buck naked. And, you know, all the players are there, and they even kind of roll their eyes at this too. They know it's like so old school and really offensive. And he's looking around. He said, anybody seen my toothbrush? I shouldn't even tell this story because it's so stupid. But my son will get a big kick out of it. So he's walking through the clubhouse and he's turning around. And he's like, anybody seen my toothbrush? Because he had just come out of the bathroom. And when he turns and you can see him, his toothbrush is sticking out of his rear end. And that's where his toothbrush was. And it totally cracked up the whole clubhouse. So it did break this tension, got them out of their own heads, and worked in that environment. I wouldn't try that in your office building. And then when I did interview Aubrey Huff after that, I said, yeah, you know, what was about the toothbrush? And his answer to me, well, make sure when you write this, you make clear that it was brush side out.
Oh my gosh, that is funny.
You didn't know the Lafayette Library was going to take you in that direction, did you? I mean, people are
The audience,
are signing off as we speak.
Oh no, I don't think so. I think anyone who's into sports and, you know, has likes to follow these teams. I mean, obviously it's the inside stuff that I think
Yeah.
is really intriguing and what people sort of look for. And along that line, I think probably the most famous giant has got to be Barry Bonds, from our era anyway. And you talk to him, you use him as an example of being a super disruptor, but you also, your description of how I don't know how I can put this, but he's such a complex character. Most of us know him from the news headlines. We know, obviously his success, but then of course the whole scandal. But in spite of all that, or maybe because of all that, you talk about what a value he brought to that team. And to me, I felt like that was an amazing example. Number one, I really appreciated the view I had of Barry Bonds after reading what you had to say in your interviews with him. But I think he's such a great example of this, and I'd love for you to talk about it a little bit.
Oh yeah, I love that chapter in the book. I really do, because I thought I set out in writing this book that, that there are, quote, super carriers of chemistry. And, I think a lot of people listening to this will recognize the name of Johnny Gomes, who grew up in Petaluma, that played for the A's, played for the Red Sox, Kansas City, several other teams. He's a journeyman outfielder, and wherever he went, his team seemed to win, right? And so I have, I have a whole chapter on Johnny Gomes and why that was. How did he influence his teammates so much? So I thought, well, if there's a super carrier, there must be super disruptors of team chemistry too. And I covered Barry Bonds back in the day. So I knew, his presence in the clubhouse when, as a media person, I was in there, and it was toxic. He was toxic. And so I thought, okay, he's my super disruptor. So I want to talk to him about team chemistry and how he saw team chemistry through his eyes. Did he think there was such a thing? Did he think he contributed to it in a positive way? Did he think we didn't need it? I was just curious what it was, because he clearly, was a cancer in the clubhouse, or so I thought. So I spent a year, because now I was working for the Giants, and he had come back after all the, the steroids and the Balco stuff. He had come back and had been hired as like an ambassador, kind of a hitting coach in that way. And so I spent a year building trust with him, talking to him about, can you hear that in the background?
Yeah.
No, okay. Yeah. My husband's in there too. It's like, you can make, if you're going to make noise, at least make me a martini or something. But anyway, so I spent a year, we would just talk in the hallway, and then, because he basically said, well, if you're interviewing me for the book, what are you going to pay me? And I was like, I'll pay you the same I pay all the other 150 people that I interviewed, which is nothing. And so I just kept talking to him, building trust, till he finally agreed. It really took a year to sit down and talk with me. And after interviewing his teammates, which I did before I talked to him, so by the time I talked to him, I realized he wasn't a super disruptor. He wasn't even a disruptor, because he's like the Steve Jobs of a clubhouse. He's a genius in what he does, which is hitting a baseball and fielding a baseball. A genius. And he has all those, kind of, as many geniuses do, they're a little different than most people. They can be very arrogant because they know so much more about this narrow discipline than anyone on earth, right? And Barry Bonds does know more about hitting a baseball than I would say anyone on earth. He's a savant when it comes to it. So his behavior was very dismissive, very arrogant. He would put people down and not even realize it. And I would venture to guess that he's probably somewhere, we're all on the autism spectrum somewhere, right? But he's definitely on, I think. He's definitely on that, in that I don't think he can really read emotions very well. He's not very empathetic. But when it comes, and his teammates understood that about him. Nobody understood it better than his teammates. And they said, are we better with him or without him? We are so much better with him. So let Barry live on that island of misfit toys on the other side of the clubhouse. Let him sit in his Barker lounger and rest because he needed to rest. Have his own masseuse because he needed it as he was getting older. Have a TV there because where he was, he couldn't see the TV. He was able to explain very clearly all the things that the press was always making fun of him for, which were the Barker lounger and all of the, his posse of guys. And he tells me, he said, now, and he would sleep in that bar. He said, now the Giants have sleeping beds. They have enough masseuses for everybody. They have all the things that I got for myself because I had one goal. I wanted to perform the best I could every single day for the fans and for my team. And I was getting ridiculed for it. He said, I never understood that. So I had a very different view of him we spent 3 hours together, then we spent another 3 hours after I'd written the book. And I told him to hold that trust because trust is a big issue for him. I said, look, Barry, when I write this, there will be nothing in here you don't already know is going to be in this book. And when I finish writing this chapter, we're going to get together and we're going to go through the chapter. And if there's something that's inaccurate or you think is unfair, I'll take out anything inaccurate and we'll talk about what you think is unfair. And so I can't tell you how much I'm going to change, but by the end, you'll know exactly what's in here. And that's exactly what we did. And there were parts of it, he's like, that hurts. And I said, yes, and it's true. He said, yeah, okay, it's true. So it was a very enlightening process for me to go through with him and totally change my mind on it, which is very exciting as a writer, that you totally learned something new and you were open to hearing it.
And that's how I felt as a reader, really going through that section. So how did he take it when you came back with your written?
He was excited about it. He knew that, the steroid stuff was going to be in there, but not hugely because it didn't, it had very little impact on team chemistry. Right. It was just that the media was coming in all the time, so that had an impact. But and just how he treated people, how he treated me when I was in the clubhouse sometimes. But he liked that I heard him, that I really listened to him, that I put my time in talking to all his teammates and had a much more comprehensive portrait of who he is and recognizing that kind of weird savantness in him and how it played out as a baseball player.
You sort of created a team with him.
Yeah. We ended up
describing there is the essence, one of the qualities that's really required to be a good team. So cool.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
We talked a little bit, well, we're talking about the super disruptor, but you do go through 7 archetypes. And I felt like that was kind of fascinating. And could you just run through that and give us, some of your highlights about your different archetypes?
Yes. So I also had this notion when I started the book, and I went through, my goodness, I had the book is only 272 pages and my outline was 498 pages. I know, which is a totally stupid thing to do as a writer because you can never get your arms around all of that. But one of the notions I had when I went back and looked at it was that I thought, this is called team chemistry, right? So you start to think, well, could it be organized or understood almost like a periodic table? That there are elements in a periodic table that if you combine certain elements, something new is produced. And it's predictable what is going to happen if you combine those types. So I thought, well, are there certain personalities, archetypes that you find on a good team chemistry team or a bad team chemistry team that together, create that good chemistry or bad chemistry? No, I'd have a list of 30 different, very, minuscule type of personalities. only to realize, oh, it doesn't work that way. You know, human beings, and you know, as you read the book, you know, what we know about the human brain is infinitely varied, right? You know, so there is no predicting how my brain is going to interact with yours, right? Because we are who we are just in relationship. So even if somebody who knows you forever can say, oh, I know Ruth is going to react this way, babe, this way, you may not, right? Because you're in conversation with, you know, you're in connection with somebody else. So anyway, I with talking to players, talking to different people, I narrowed it down to 7 archetypes that it's not based on any studies. This is the one thing in the book that is totally just based on my observations over a million years being in this business and talking to tons of players and managers to see if it resonates with them. So I narrowed it down to 7. So do you have the list in front of you?
I have the book in front of me, yes.
Okay, you have the book. But so I always forget one, but it's the sage, the kid, the warrior, the buddy,
Yep.
the enforcer. What else?
You want a critique or something? Let's see. I'll look it up. The 7 archetypes. Here we go.
Yeah, and I have it here too. I always forget one or two.
All right, I put you on the spot with a hard question. You have-
No, it's not. And actually,
How about the spark plug?
oh, the jester.
The kid, the enforcer, the buddy. You're right. The
Yeah.
warrior, the jester,
Yep,
and that's it. That's our 7.
I think that's it. That's 7. Yeah. So you find in my theory about those 7 archetypes that you find in good chemistry teams is that they don't come in as the jester or the buddy or the sage maybe. The team manifests what it needs. So you could be a jester on one team and be the buddy on the next team, or the sage, or even the kid. And the kid doesn't necessarily have to be young, because I do think Steph Curry is all 7. There are certain,
I
Yeah.
thought we talked about that too. So
certain people are all 7. That is, you know, that's the guy you look for, but they're obviously extremely rare. Because if you're the warrior, meaning that, like, Barry Bonds was the warrior of the Giants when he was on that team. So, you know, Derek Jeter was the warrior on the Yankees for all those years. And now it's Aaron Judge for the Yankees. So, but where was I going with this? On
we're kind of talking about how they can
Steph Curry.
they can be
Oh, yes. That the
on this team, and yeah.
Right, the team manifests it. So, for instance, Aubrey Huff, to get back to that team manifested him as a leader. He wasn't the warrior, but he was the jester. He was probably a little bit of the buddy, you know, and the buddy is the person, like, nobody eats alone. And he did reach out to people. Come on, guys, you know, we're all going out to dinner. You know, let's go get drunk together, or whatever it is, you know. So that team manifested what it needed. And I think that's a fascinating, I couldn't delve too deeply into it because I don't know exactly how it operates, that it manifests those, you know, the pieces that it needs. But I think, you know, tribalism is the foundational human behavior. And to stay together as a tribe, we can't have 4 warriors, right? We can't have everybody being the jester.
Right.
So we need diversity. And if it's not already there, that tribe creates it, makes it diverse. And if it's not diverse by race or ethnicity or gender or whatever, it's still going to be diverse, because it has to be diverse. It can't operate successfully unless there is diversity. We balance each other out. We lift each other up. We bring things out in each other that we can't willingly summon for ourselves. So there have to be a lot of different personalities. And so maybe that piece of your personality is then amplified within one culture that's not amplified within a different culture because that culture didn't need it.
Yeah, good point. That's a good way to think about it. As you're talking, it reminds me, just brings to mind, we discussed in the book one of the Olympic swimmers, Jason Lezak, and you give a really good example of his participation in the team, on that relay team, and then his performance as a solo. And maybe share that with everybody. I thought that was also fascinating. I kind of, I'm a cyclist and I've been doing it for 20 plus years. And there is that funny little thing when someone's coming up behind you and you think, oh, I guess I don't really want to be passed, do I?
That's right.
But anyway, obviously this is a much higher level example, but I related to it and I thought it was fascinating and thought maybe it'd be fun to share that.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And, of course, because as I told you, I'm not a stats person or a numbers person. So I'm not even going to remember. I think it was 2008, but I can't remember what year it was. But at the Olympics. So Jason Lezak, is one of the premier 50-meter swimmers. I think it's 50 meters. And, or 100 meters, sorry, 100-meter swimmers. So he's on, he's swimming in the individual and he's also swimming in the relay on Michael Phelps's team. And Lezak is the anchor. So by the time he gets into, and they're not heavily favored to win, but they're favored to win. But their biggest rival were the French. And the French had this amazing swimmer whose name I can't remember, but it's in the book if anybody's interested in it. And I think he held the individual world record for the 100. So it was a 400-meter relay, everybody's doing 100. So Lezak, when he gets in the pool, he dives into the pool, they're behind by like a full second, which is huge in that race. So, and the French guy is in the lane next to him and he's behind, like maybe a length behind. And they get to the turn and he's still like a half a length behind, which is impossible to make up over 50 meters, against the world record holder.
Yeah.
And his teammates are on the edge of the pool and they're cheering and jumping up and down, and he starts to catch up. And now it's like a dead heat and he gets his fingers on the edge of the pool before the other guy does, and they win. And Lezak, he swam the fastest time he had ever swum, even accounting for that it's a rolling start on a relay as opposed to you have to wait for the whistle or the gun or whatever goes off. So now he goes to his individual event and he finishes third or something like that, not even close to how fast, even given for the rolling start that he did before. And so these two scientists, European scientists, then looked at all the swimmers from that Olympics who swam in a relay and individually. And those that swam the second, third, or fourth leg all swam faster in their relay than they did individually. And it goes to, for the third time since we started talking, that Jake Peavy quote that my teammates, bring out a fight in me that I can't willingly summon for myself. There is something, and it gets back to also that innate tribal quality we have in each other, that our tribes elevate us. And that's why team chemistry, like the only function of team chemistry is to elevate performance. And all of these weird studies, from rowing to swimming to, other real kind of team sports, all show that that's what team chemistry can do. that, and the military, no entity understands this more than the military, right? You know, you can, you know, you're fighting for God and country. When you're in the heat of battle and you absolutely have to perform under unbearable stress, your motivation comes from something much closer at hand than God and country, and it's the guy next to you. And that gets you through. And the military, through the ages, has always understood that.
You do interview General McChrystal, which I found that interesting too. Obviously, a huge example of what you're discussing. And I'd love to get off on that track. I have a cousin who's a major general in the Army, and he's the person in the family that communicates everything we all need to know, that motivates to get things done. I mean, he's just got that thing about him, you know. I mean, it's been part of it, a huge part of his career is learning that and living it. And obviously, as you move through and become a leader, it's been more and more important. But I think, well, we're getting close to the end here, but I'd love to just spend a few more minutes. We've talked a lot about players and stuff. Are there any coaches you'd like to highlight?
Bruce Bochy was a master, the Giants manager for however many years he was there, but won the 3 World Series with them. He was a master at acceptance of his players and treating them like adults. He really got to know his players, and he counted on them to be their own leaders in the clubhouse. And he was amazing. And Roger Craig, who was the manager of that 89 team, and I'm looking at your face, getting your signals, Ruth.
Definitely, I'm interested. I want to tell me more about that team. That also was that 1988 team. I think was very. It was fascinating reading your story, not only about the team but about the reunion and just the inspiration there. But yeah, we're getting close to the end. We're going to bring in a question, and then if it's okay with you, we'll just go another minute or so.
Sure. Are you ready to go, Jeff?
Joan, I wanted to ask you a question about, of all the work you've done over the years, and you've seen a lot of phenomenal teams and examples of great team chemistry, and I would wonder if you have a first on your list of most improbable teams, those who, by the statistics or their previous performance, would be least likely to become a championship team or to do what they did. Is there something that stands out, that such a big gap between what everyone might have anticipated and what actually happened?
There probably are really great examples that I don't know, but just from my own experience, which is mostly
sure,
Giants, Warriors, 49ers, A's. Well, the A's probably, but they didn't really make it all the way. But I would say the 2010 Giants, from the teams that I know, they had a lot of really good players, obviously, but they didn't seem ready yet. They had the catcher had only been, catching in the major leagues for one season, only was the starter for half a season, right? So, and they had the young, Tim Lincecum, of course, he had already won a Cy Young. That was a team that nobody picked at the start of that season to win. And they did. And actually 2012 and 2014, nobody picked, almost nobody picked those two teams to win the World Series. And a lot of it, goes back to, Ruth, talking about a manager. A lot of it goes to Bruce Bochy, and a lot of it goes to their clubhouse leadership was amazing, really amazing. Yeah, so I would say the 2010 Giants, but I'm sure there's tons and tons of examples
And
out
there are
there.
probably countless examples of the opposite, you know, teams that are so loaded with talent
Oh,
that
yeah.
despite that just imploded because they did not have that team chemistry.
Right. Right.
Well,
Right.
it seems like wherever LeBron James goes, they do
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are certain players that, you know, like Barry Bonds, you know, he's just so good. He's going to put you up into that, you know, that level. And also LeBron James is an actually great leader too.
He
You know,
is.
Bonds
Yeah.
didn't necessarily have. Yeah.
Yeah, he brings everybody up with him.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this has been fabulous. The inside scoop stories are so cool. The stuff that nobody has insight to.
That's
Ruthie,
part of
unless you have any other comments or questions, I would just encourage everyone to go to or into books or wherever to get your copy of this book and read even more about these cool inside stories. Then thank you, Joan.
Yeah, and one thing, you know, I want to get my email out because if somebody does buy the book or has the book, wants to buy it for somebody for Christmas, my email is Joan Ryan and the number 1 at gmail.com, or they can go to my website. And because, you know, I can't be at libraries or bookstores, I have these great book plates that if you email me with your address and your name and who you want it inscribed to, I will write you out a book plate and send it directly to your house so you can put it inside the book as if it's, well, not as if it's signed, it is signed.
Thank you, that's very generous.
And Ruth, I really want to thank you. You read the book so thoroughly and you asked such good questions and allowed me to go on and on and on. It was a wonderful, wonderful interview.
Well, thank you very much. And hopefully if we get back into real life again, we'll have another opportunity to host you. I think it would be a real honor and a great experience. So thank you for this book. And I just wish you great success. And yeah, all I can say is great job. And
thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Yes, we'll see you next year. How about when the paperback comes out and the coronavirus is over?
We'll hold you to that.
Okay, I'll hold you to that.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to our next opportunity.
Bye-bye.